Hello, viewers. Good afternoon. This is Peter Owiso. I'm a teacher by profession, and also I'm a special needs teacher from Kenya Institute of Special Needs Education. It's a pleasure to have you this afternoon and to share knowledge with you about a management strategy on behavioral issues. And specifically, I'm going to talk about ABA as a strategy that is used in managing behavioral issues. ABA in full is applied behavior analysis. So when we talk of applied behavior analysis, it's a way that we use Tito, power. It's one of the ways that has been used and that has existed for a very long time. Power. Sorry for that. For a very long time, it's been in place. And I just want to say something here, that it's one of the things that, or one of the strategies that our parents used when we were growing up. But surprisingly, most of us did not know that it's one of the ways that our parents used. So with the current research and a lot of information and the issues to do with special needs and disability, it is one of the ways that has been researched, and it has been brought on board as a way of managing our learners with autism. And the information I'm going to share this afternoon specifically is not meant only for those who are trained in the line of special needs, but I want to believe this information is going to be very important to parents, caregivers, and at large even to anybody outside there that is having an interaction with our learners or our children with autism, or those who are falling in the autism spectrum disorder. I'll just give a very short, brief history of ABA, that is applied behavior analysis, how it started. It's rooted early from 1920s to 1950s, and it was developed by behaviorists, guys like B.F. Skinner, who came up with so many theories to explain on how behavior can be managed and how behavior can be improved to help learners with disabilities, and specifically in this case, I'm talking about learners with autism. So this approach majorly depends on the strength of the learners or the strength of the children. Many a times when we are talking about behavior management, normally we tend to look at the undesirable behaviors. But when we are following this strategy as one of the best strategies that is used and has been proven to be working, I want us to look at the strength of our children, because when you are applying, just let me give a brief explanation on layman's perspective of applying. And I want to give a simple explanation or a simple example. Our ladies or our mothers outside there, when you want your skin to be fine and you look presentable, we normally use the body lotions. When you apply, you don't expect the result to be immediately. It takes some time. In other words, when we are using this approach as a strategy for managing learners with autism, and especially issues to do with behavior, it needs, number one, you must be passionate and you must have love for whatever you're going to do. Number two, you must be patient, because it is not a question of applying the strategy today and then tomorrow you see 100% result in change of behavior. It doesn't work like that. It's a question of time, and it's a question of patience, and most importantly, a question of consistency, so that at the end of the exercise, the result of the expected or desirable behavior is observed. So ABA has its main goals, and the goal is to improve on the three main areas of our learners with autism. Remember, when we're talking about autism, we talk that it involves the three areas. That is the area of communication, social interaction, and cognitive abilities. So when you're applying this strategy, you must base your argument and you must base your strategy on these areas, that the behavior you want to correct, the behavior you want to improve on, it must be within the area of social interaction. It must also be an area of communication, and at the same time, targeting to improve the cognitive ability or the skills. So when we are talking about ABA has very strategic steps that I want to believe will help most of our parents I'm very sorry for that technical glitch. Sorry. Allow me to continue. I was saying, so I'm taking you through on how we are going to help these learners on issues behavior when we are applying the ABA system or strategy. So number one, I've talked of behavior assessment. There is what we call behavior assessment. And what do I mean by behavior assessment? Every child has a potential. Every child has strengths, and every child has needs that are needed to be assessed before you start applying this strategy. So ABA mostly work on the strength. You know, most of the time when you are correcting or when you want to talk of desirable behaviors, we normally peg our arguments or look on the negative sides. But when we take this approach, I want us to look at the strengths of this learner or the strengths of the children that we are trying to modify their behavior. Because it is said, behavior can be learned, behavior can be unlearned, and then again, behavior can be relearned. And deep inside each and every child, there is strength. So this approach works best when we look at the strength of this child we want to modify, whatever kind of behavior that the child is possessing. I may give an example. Some of the worrying behaviors that parents, caregivers, teachers, and the community worry about our learners with autism are issues like temper tantrums, we have aggression. But let's ask ourselves, what brings about all these behavioral issues? There must be a cause. There must be triggers that must be looked into. So when we are applying ABA as a strategy for managing behavior, number one, we have to assess the strength of the child we want to modify the behavior in. Then number two, we have what I call target behavior. So every caregiver, every teacher, every person that is dealing with behavior issues when we are applying ABA strategies, we must look into what we call the target behavior. What do I mean by the target behavior? There are so many behaviors that these learners or the child can exhibit. But then there is this behavior that is so worrying, and logically you want to eliminate this behavior. So this is what we call the target behavior. We look at this in the area of communication. And I want to say this, nonverbal children. This may lead to maybe aggressiveness, and maybe this is the behavior that you want to correct. So what triggers this? The trigger that comes with this may be that the caregiver, the parent, the child, or whoever is dealing with this learner or child with autism at a particular time doesn't understand the child's need, the child's mode of communication. And this is what happens when the child is not understood, then the issue of aggression comes in. So the child becomes violent. At times, the child will exhibit self-injurious behaviors, and the whole issue become complex. When we apply ABA, we analyze this targeted behavior. Then we look into the root cause. If it is falling under communication as one of the issues falling under the spectrum, then it is not a must that the child must verbally talk. You can come up with other means of communication so that you understand how you communicate. You can introduce simple sign language. You can introduce the use of visual cues so that at the end of the day, this targeted behavior that you want to modify, you have a clue into it before you start modifying the behavior. Then we have what we call functional behavior, analyzing the purpose of the behavior. You analyze, why does the child behave in a particular manner? Every behavior that is exhibited by a child, that is portrayed as a reason to why the child may behave in a certain way. The child may be aggressive because the child wants attention. The child may be aggressive because the child seeks to be understood. So functional behavior, understanding why the behavior is occurring. This is where I will bring the ABC. The ABC where I talk of the antecedent, what happens before the behavior occurs. Then we have the behavior itself. Why does the child behave? And when the child behaves in a particular manner, what brings this? You look at this in prior to what happened previously. And then again, after the behavior has occurred, then now we look at the consequences. So, number one, I've said, for you to manage behavior using ABA as a strategy, we first look at the behavior assessment where you look at the strength of the child and the weaknesses, and you pick it from there. Then you look at the target behavior, then you come to functional behavior. Then we have what we call, you develop a strategy. And when you are developing a strategy, you are having what we call behavioral intervention. Once you have identified the first three steps and you have identified the functional behavior, now you can develop strategies. There are so many strategies, and I may quote the famous theorists, guys like B.F. Skinner, who came up with theories like the operant theories. Behaviors that children exhibit, they do occur for a purpose. So if you want to modify a behavior, then there are so many things that you can do to make sure that your child exhibits or portrays a positive behavior or a desirable behavior. So there are so many strategies that can be used. You can approach modification by doing what is called positive reinforcement. So ABA will stress on this because it has proven to be working. For example, a child who exhibits aggression, who cries without any good reason, maybe just to seek for attention, can be managed. This behavior can be modified through positive reinforcement. How do you do it? You talk to a child or if the child is nonverbal and the child cries just to seek attention, then you may decide to ignore. But when the child behaves in a particular way or behaves in a recommended manner, then you reinforce. And when you are doing positive reinforcement, it can be done in so many ways. You can appreciate the child through clapping. You can use words like, you can tell the child bravo when he has behaved in a desirable manner. There are so many ways, but the only thing I would discourage is that when you are using positive reinforcement as a way in ABA, normally I tell parents and caregivers and people interacting with autistic children that we avoid so much of giving foodstuffs, because at one point you cannot sustain reinforcing a behavior by giving foodstuffs constantly. Then I would also talk of functional communication as another strategy under ABA. Functional communication training, especially for our children who have issues with communication. I want to encourage our parents like this, caregivers, and everybody who is listening to me, that our children that are falling in the autism spectrum disorder normally have challenges with communication as one of the things that falls within the ASD. So if your child cannot verbalize, he cannot communicate, then ABA advises that you invest in other areas. We have other areas that will ensure that communication takes place. Earlier on, I talked of simple sign language, the basic ones. It must not be the standard one that is maybe taught, like in Kenya, we have the Kenyan Sign Language. But you can come up with, at grassroots level, at household levels, you can come up with simple signs that this child can use to communicate. Once this is done, it will help in reduction of issues to do with aggression, issues to do with self-injury, because once there is communication in place and you and the child understand each other, then that behavior can easily be controlled. You can use visual cues, have pictures that depicts, that shows the child needs and demands. Send the child to points on the picture, and then it can make communication easy. So when communication is easy, then everything moves. So not necessarily that the challenge that most of the caregivers and most of the people I've interacted with, you find parents are worried that my child is 4 years, my child is approaching 6, 7, and he still cannot call daddy, mommy. My advice is applying the ABA as a strategy, invest and look at the child's strength. If the child is in a position to grasp basic sign language, basic visual cues, use augmentative ways of communication, total communication, let you as a caregiver, as a parent, invest in this so that it becomes easy, and the issues of aggression and any other behavioral challenge that you want to deal with will be lessened. You will have easy time in controlling such like behavior. Then I also look at this in this way. ABA also stresses on what we call data collection and analysis. For you to control, for you to modify a specific behavior, you need to do what is called data collection. You need to take time to observe on these specific behaviors you want to modify. Take intervals, take time, collect data, monitor your child on the areas, specifically and categorically. Once you picked on the targeted behavior that you want to modify under ABA, then it is advisable that when you are working, and I said you need to be patient. So take your time. It will take you weeks, it will take you months, but what is important is that you monitor the progress, make the data, and you record. On such a day, the child behaves in this way. On such a day, the behavior was this way. On such a day, the behavior was this way. By doing this, you are in a position of coming up with a workable data that when you sit down and you analyze, it will help you. It will help you to know the frequency of how the behavior occurs, the duration. And once you have all these, then it makes the whole process easy, because once you have the intervals, you have the duration, now you can easily apply your strategy. You can come up with a working strategy and you say, if this behavior is occurring for this duration, what can I do? You see, already you've collected data. When you look at the frequency, how often, how long does the behavior occur? So ABS stresses that when we are modifying behavior, we have real data that is collected over a period of time, so that when you are applying this strategy, you are working with the data that is there, and that is approved to whatever you want to modify. Then, having talked of this, ABA also stresses on what I call generalization of knowledge, of skills and ideas. You teach various skills. You see, when I talk of generalization of knowledge, earlier on I talked of reinforcing behaviors using different ways. Like I talked of positive reinforcement. So once the child develops all this and you've collected the data and you are applying the strategy, now if the strategy you are applying, you've started it at home, then you expect that this same strategy, you are going to apply it when you come to maybe a social setup to deal with issues of social interaction. If the child is aggressive, and maybe you find or you've come up with a way that the child knows that when I do this, mom or dad will do this. The child knows that if I behave in a desirable manner, this is what I get. I get a present, mommy praises me, mommy hugs me. This is at household level. Now we extend this to social settings, like when you present a child, you go to the church, you go to social gatherings like weddings. So you generalize whatever has been taught at home, it is brought back now to the public domain, so that the knowledge that is learned is not just for household purposes, but it's then spread across all the spheres, so that it becomes important. Then another important thing that I also wanted to talk about when we are applying ABA as a strategy of modifying and managing behavior. ABA works best not only with professionals, but it works best when you do what is called collaboration. And this collaboration is not only with the family members. It must be extended. If the child is maybe school-going age, then it must be extended to the school level. It must be extended to the community level. And then it must be extended even with the caregivers. What do I mean? ABS stresses on the strength. And you develop on the strength. And whatever strength you are developing in, you must extend it to the caregivers. If it is positive reinforcement, the child should know that it is not only at home that when he behaves in a desirable manner, he gets a reward. Maybe if I give it the educational approach, like what we do with our learners in school, we do a lot of management and strategy concerning behaviors. For example, I have this child who is having behavior issues to do maybe out of seat behavior, like the child cannot settle for a given time, and this trend maybe make the whole process of learning becomes a challenge. So what do I do? Once I develop a strategy, maybe I come up with maybe a strategy of timeout, that I tell my child that, John, when you sit in class or when we stay here like for 5 minutes, you give a timeout. They go out or they take a break, and then they come, they relax. So the same should be applied at home. I should explain to the caregivers and the parents that if he becomes uneasy, if he becomes restless, then you should give those timeouts. Like when you've given some work at home, let them have time out so that the aggression levels and the anxiety that will eventually lead to behavioral issues are contained. So basically, this collaboration is important because whatever as teachers, especially teachers dealing with learners with special needs, we advocate that the strategies that we teach must be collaborated. It must involve parents, caregivers, and eventually the community at large must also be involved so that we know that whatever effort is being made at school level, at home level, at any juncture must be extended outside so that as this child interacts with the outside world, what is instilled maybe at school level or at home level is extended outside there, and it makes the strategy works perfectly. Then another thing that needs to be done, we have what we call the support plan. These children also need support plan, and the support plan must clearly give out the strategies that we are using. Like in this case, I'm talking of the ABS strategy. So this support plan must outline clearly, and I'm saying clearly, these challenges that we are dealing with. The support plan must also outline clearly the response and the effective of what has been achieved and what has been done. Once we have this, it's automatically going to make our work easier, because from this support plan, you know, when you are developing a new behavior, like I said earlier, or you are mentoring a child to develop a desirable behavior, a lot can be done. You can do modification on the behavior that you've developed. When a child behaves in a desirable manner, you can modify. You can come up with new strategies, and you add these strategies to whatever is already existing. So what am I saying? You must come up with a support plan that reinforces all that I've talked of. This support plan must be shared with the parents. It must be shared with, maybe if it is in the educational setup, it must be shared with the stakeholders in the educational setup. It must also be shared with the parents or guardians who are handling this plan. So you develop a plan that outlines strategies for the challenging issues and the behaviors, and responding to them effectively if they occur. So what am I saying, my good people? I'm saying that ABA works when we follow this trend. It works, and it has been proven. And I'm stressing the point that when you decide to use this strategy for managing behaviors in our learners with autism, then patience is the key thing. But then again, I also want to emphasize that ABA as a strategy needs a lot of consistency so that at the end of the day, we achieve all this that we want in modification of behaviors. Consistency in the sense that you don't give up, because I know the guys and my good people have met, and especially our parents and the caregivers and those who are having children that are falling within the autism spectrum disorder. One of the challenges that we have is that we always have that urge that when a specialist or somebody who is having knowledge in this line approaches you, we normally want immediate feedback. Behavioral issues don't just change overnight. It takes time. And believe you me, if you are patient, you are consistent with the strategy, then I want to tell you, at the end of the day, everything is going to work perfectly. Because at the end of the day, applying the strategy. For example, let me give an example like when we are talking about issues like maybe toilet training. That one I know is one of the areas that most of our parents and autism spectrum disorder. I want to give that as a very good example that will help us to understand basically what I'm talking about. You find that you have a child that has issues with the toilet training, and you want to apply ABA as a strategy of dealing and containing this behavior so that you don't get the embarrassment, you don't end up stressing yourself every day. It is important to note that you start it step by step. You start by the strength, just as I talked earlier, that you assess the strength of this child you want to correct. And in this case, I'm giving an example of a case of like toilet training as a behavior you want to modify and help the child develop it. So at first, the child cannot automatically identify maybe if it is a potty or a toilet. Start it gradually by maybe show the child the picture of a potty. See if the child has the ability to identify the structure, what it is used for. Then you start it from there. Then gradually show a picture of what is happening, how the potty is used. Next, maybe go to a video, show this child that this is what is done. And the process should take time. It should be sequential and there should be consistency so that the child doesn't get bored and the whole thing blows up and you end up getting frustrated. Eventually, as time goes by, you'll be introducing bit by bit, helping the child maybe to sit on the potty or introducing the child to the toilet. And it takes time. When the child maybe messes himself or herself, then now you bring in the issues of reinforcement. And now this is where things like positive reinforcement comes in, where you applaud the child for the first attempts. I've seen cases where like the child maybe holds for some time even before going to the toilet, and then the child messes up himself or herself, and then you find the parent or the caregiver become very mad. This is what I'm saying. For ABA, it doesn't work like that. It needs consistency, it needs patience, and most importantly, it needs love. So that is one of the key areas that most of the parents have interacted with, have stress with. That, oh, teacher, oh, you are an expert in this. My child cannot toilet train. I've tried this strategy. I've tried this. I've tried that. So this afternoon, I want to encourage you, I want to emphasize that when you take this approach that I'm explaining this afternoon is that you must be consistent. You must introduce so many other avenues. And what is good with ABA as a strategy is that it also works with other strategies. You can bring in issues like social stories. You talk, you give a story that relates to whatever behavior that you want to develop or modify. Bring in issues like, you can bring in issues like token economy. Those are some of the strategies that work along with ABA very well. Reward the child positively. You can even use the oldest and working strategies like ignoring together with this ABA, where if the undesirable behavior is exhibited or is shown, then you ignore. So the child will learn that all the positive behaviors are associated with the rewards. And once the child internalizes this and the child understands this, then it becomes a walk in the park because it sequentially and eventually develops bit by bit. So ABA as a strategy, I want to encourage most of us that as much as it is a scientific approach that has lasted for years, but necessarily it can work for any other caregiver outside there, any other teacher outside there, any other parent outside there, to help in modification of behaviors in our children, in our learners, and in individuals who are in the spectrum, in the autism spectrum disorder. I want to say this. ABA as a strategy also stresses on ethical consideration. It's a wholesome and a holistic approach again when I talk of ethical consideration. This is the only strategy that allows us to look into learners' diversity background and support following this. So I want to say this. When you take this approach, be sure that it's going to work. But this is my stressing and closing remark as I wonder that number one, you must have love and passion when you want to help in behavior modification using the ABA approach. Number two, it takes time, and consistency and patience is the key to achieve when we want to use this strategy. Otherwise, I want to thank the Autism Connect for giving me this opportunity. It's great pleasure to share knowledge on issues to do with managing behavioral issues in our learners with autism. I want to say that these learners have the ability and they are able to learn more than the typical learners when we create a conducive environment that will support their learning both at home, in school setup, and in the community at large. And ABA as a strategy is the way to go to help our learners. So I think with the much that I've said, I want to believe that we've grasped something. And my final remark is be patient, be consistent, love what you're doing. Thank you for listening to me and for giving me your time and your ears. God bless you. Thank you.